member from Welland.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Premier. My office has been flooded with complaints around the skyrocketing hydro bills from people like Lorna Lampman. Now, Lorna has lived in St. Catharines, the whip may know her, for 30 years and says she's never in her life seen a hydro bill so high. Her bills have tripled over the last few years. Her last hydro bill was $600. Lorna is in her early 50s. She has a decent job, but her husband is on a disability pension, and they find themselves having to choose between whether they can put some money away for retirement or whether they're going to pay that hydro bill. Why is the Premier choosing to put $40 billion in the pocket of bankers and ignore the very people like Lorna Lampman who need our help most?
Minister of Energy.
Minister of Energy.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for the question. It is important, Mr. Speaker, that we acted to ensure that we're helping people like the honourable member had mentioned, Mr. Speaker. And that's why the Fair Hydro Plan, the single largest electricity rate reduction in Ontario's history, will be providing a 25% reduction for that family, Mr. Speaker, and for all families across the province. And while I don't know the specifics of that individual's family, Mr. Speaker, the Ontario Electricity Support Program is there to help those type of families, Mr. Speaker, and we also increased the OESP program, Mr. Speaker, by 50% and increased it so more families and more individuals will qualify, Mr. Speaker. So the OESP program is there to help. And on top of that, Mr. Speaker, we created the Affordability Fund. The Affordability Fund will actually help them through their utility, Mr. Speaker, to actually make their home more energy conservation, Mr. Speaker, to actually reduce their bills.
Supplementary.
Well, thank you, Speaker. I'm not sure that the minister understands, because Lorna doesn't want this pushed onto her children and her grandchildren. And it's not just people like Lorna that are worried about retirement that I'm hearing from that are struggling to pay their bills. I also recently heard from a young student in my riding who suffers from a disability. She expects to graduate soon. She worries about her student loans and the interest that she's going to have to pay when she's finished her studies. But she too is finding that choice. Do I put some money away for my student loan payments, or do I pay the ever-rising hydro bills? Speaker, why is the Premier continuing to support wealthy bankers instead of the very students and people trying to retire in this province?
Thank you. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to say that that individual student, Mr. Speaker, will also qualify for the 25% reduction. But on top of that, Mr. Speaker, by the great work by the Deputy Premier and her ministry, all students moving forward, Mr. Speaker, are going to get free tuition as well, Mr. Speaker, and that's fantastic. So not only are we providing free tuition, Mr. Speaker, but we're working with folks right across the province to help them reduce their bills, Mr. Speaker. And yesterday, as I mentioned, Mr. Speaker, I was in Hamilton, and you know, Mr. Speaker, the mayor isn't the only Hamiltonian that is excited about our plan. Electra, Mr. Speaker, they're talking about how the homeowners in Hamilton will see more than 25% savings, Mr. Speaker. The folks in Hamilton, they'll see between 27 and 28% reductions, Mr. Speaker, because of our Fair Hydro Plan, Mr. Speaker. That's a significant savings for families and small businesses, and that's something, Mr. Speaker, I do hope that the opposition will support, because it is helping all families right across the province.